In the early years of the 20th century, the world believed it was entering an age where technology could conquer almost anything. Cities were growing taller, machines were becoming more powerful, and engineers were proving that human ambition had almost no limits. But in 1912, one project captured the imagination of the entire world. A ship so enormous, so luxurious, and so technologically advanced that many believed it represented the pinnacle of human engineering. That ship was the RMS Titanic, constructed in the massive shipyards of Belfast by the legendary company Harland and Wolff. The Titanic was designed to dominate the Atlantic Ocean. At nearly 900 feet long, it was the largest moving object humans had ever built at the time. To people standing beside it at the docks, the ship looked less like a vessel and more like a floating city of steel. 4 massive funnels rose above its decks. Gigantic engines powered enormous propellers beneath the waterline, and inside its walls was a level of luxury never before seen on the open sea. For first-class passengers, traveling on the Titanic felt like staying in one of the finest hotels in the world. There were grand staircases made from carved oak and glass domes, elegant dining rooms illuminated by chandeliers, a swimming pool, a gymnasium, reading lounges, and even Turkish baths. Wealthy passengers dined on multi-course meals prepared by some of the best chefs in Europe. Orchestras performed live music while guests walked along polished promenades overlooking the Atlantic. For the elite of society, the Titanic was more than transportation. It was a symbol of status, but far below the luxury of first class, hundreds of other passengers were traveling with very different dreams. Families packed into third-class cabins carried little more than suitcases and hope. Many of them were immigrants heading toward a new life in the United States. To them, the Titanic was a bridge between the old world and the promise of America. On April 10, 1912, the enormous ship began its maiden voyage from the busy port of Southampton. Thousands of spectators gathered to watch as the massive vessel slowly pulled away from the harbor. Smoke drifted from its towering funnels. Steam hissed from powerful engines, and the ship began its journey across the Atlantic toward New York City. On board were more than 2,200 passengers and crew. Among them were some of the wealthiest individuals in the world: industrialists, business tycoons, prominent social figures, but also teachers, laborers, farmers, and children seeking better futures. For several days, the voyage felt almost magical. Passengers strolled along the decks under clear skies. Champagne glasses clinked during elegant dinners. Music drifted through the halls late into the night. Everything about the journey suggested safety, comfort, and control. After all, many people believed the Titanic possessed a revolutionary safety feature. Its hull was divided into 16 watertight compartments designed to keep the ship afloat even if several sections were damaged. To the public, this design created a powerful myth. The Titanic was unsinkable. Newspapers celebrated the ship as a triumph of modern engineering. Confidence surrounded the voyage, perhaps too much confidence. Because far away in the dark waters of the North Atlantic, the ocean was hiding a danger that technology could not easily defeat. During the days leading up to the disaster, several ships traveling through the same region began sending wireless messages. Their warnings were simple, but serious. Large ice fields had formed in the shipping lanes. Massive icebergs were drifting south into the exact path Titanic was planning to follow. These messages were received by the ship's wireless operators. But aboard the Titanic, life continued as usual. Passengers danced in elegant halls. Children played along the decks. And deep below the surface of the ocean, silent mountains of ice floated through the darkness. No one on board could see them yet, but they were there, waiting in the cold black waters ahead. Within days, one of those icebergs would collide with the most famous ship ever built, and in just a few terrifying hours, the legend of the unsinkable Titanic would be shattered forever. The night of April 14, 1912, began like any other peaceful evening aboard the Titanic. Dinner had ended hours earlier. Music drifted through the first-class lounges where passengers laughed and talked late into the night. On the open decks, the Atlantic air felt unusually calm. The ocean was so still that sailors later described it as looking like a sheet of black glass. But that calm surface was hiding a dangerous problem. Normally, waves breaking against icebergs create white foam that can be seen from far away. But on this particular night, the sea was completely flat, which meant icebergs, drifting through the darkness, would be almost invisible. High above the deck, in the ship's crow's nest, the lookout sailors scanned the horizon. They had no binoculars, only their eyes, and the cold wind of the North Atlantic. For hours they stared into the darkness, searching for anything unusual. Then, at exactly 11:40 p.m., one of them suddenly froze. Straight ahead in the darkness, something massive appeared, a towering shadow rising from the sea. An iceberg. The lookout immediately rang the warning bell 3 times and picked up the telephone connected to the bridge. Iceberg right ahead. Inside the control room, officers reacted instantly. The command was shouted to the engine room. Full reverse. Turn hard to port. Deep below the decks, powerful engines began slowing. The enormous ship started turning. But there was a problem. The Titanic was simply too big, and it was moving too fast. Within seconds, the iceberg scraped along the side of the ship. Passengers felt only a slight vibration, almost like the ship had brushed against something small. But beneath the waterline, the damage was catastrophic. The iceberg had torn open several sections of the hull. Seawater began rushing into the watertight compartments one by one. At first, many passengers barely noticed anything had happened. In the warm lounges and cabins, the night continued as normal. Some people even joked about the small bump they had felt. But down in the lower decks, crew members were already seeing the terrifying truth. Cold Atlantic water was flooding into the ship, and it was rising fast. When the ship's chief designer examined the damage, he delivered the most chilling conclusion imaginable. The Titanic would sink. The watertight compartments that were supposed to protect the ship were now filling with water faster than anyone expected, and once enough of them flooded, the bow of the ship would begin pulling the entire vessel beneath the ocean. The estimated time before the Titanic disappeared was less than 3 hours. At first, the officers tried to avoid panic. Passengers were calmly instructed to put on life jackets and come up to the decks. But as lifeboats were prepared, a disturbing reality became clear. The Titanic did not have enough lifeboats for everyone on board. More than 2,200 people were on the ship, but the lifeboats could only carry about half that number. The ship's designers had believed the Titanic itself was the safest lifeboat. Now, that assumption was about to cost hundreds of lives. As the situation became more serious, the famous order was announced: women and children first. Crew members began loading passengers into lifeboats while the ship slowly tilted forward into the dark ocean. Some passengers refused to believe the ship was truly in danger. Others began realizing the terrible truth. The unsinkable Titanic was dying. Soon panic spread across the decks. Families were separated. Passengers begged for space in the lifeboats, and below them, the freezing Atlantic water continued rising through the ship. Yet even as chaos grew, something remarkable was happening. Inside the first-class lounge, The ship's orchestra continued playing music. The musicians performed calmly as passengers prepared for the lifeboats, their music drifting through the cold night air. A final act of courage as disaster unfolded around them. But the worst part of the night was still ahead, because as the lifeboats drifted away from the ship, hundreds of people remained trapped on board, watching the bow sink deeper into the ocean, listening to the groaning sounds of steel under unimaginable pressure, and realizing that soon, the most famous ship in the world would disappear beneath the Atlantic forever. By the early hours of April 15, 1912, the fate of the Titanic was sealed. The enormous ship that had once symbolized human confidence and engineering power was now slowly dying in the freezing darkness of the North Atlantic. Water had flooded multiple compartments. The bow of the ship was sinking deeper into the ocean with every passing minute. On the decks, the atmosphere had completely changed. Hours earlier, passengers had been laughing, dining, and listening to music. Now they stood in the cold night air wearing life jackets, watching lifeboats disappear into the darkness. Each lifeboat that lowered into the water meant fewer chances for the hundreds of people still waiting on board. Crew members struggled to keep order as fear spread through the crowd. Some passengers prayed, others begged for space in the lifeboats. Families were forced to make impossible decisions. Husbands helped their wives and children into boats, knowing they might never see them again. In the distance, lifeboats floated silently on the black surface of the ocean. From those small boats, survivors watched the massive silhouette of the Titanic rising higher into the night sky. The bow continued sinking while the stern lifted farther and farther above the water. Inside the ship, the sounds of disaster grew louder. Steel beams groaned under enormous pressure. Furniture and equipment slid across tilted floors. Seawater rushed through corridors that had once been filled with passengers. At approximately 2:18 in the morning, witnesses in the lifeboats saw something terrifying. The massive ship began to break apart. The stress on the hull had become too great. The Titanic split into two sections. Moments later, the front half disappeared beneath the surface of the ocean. The remaining section of the ship briefly stood almost vertical in the water. Then it too slipped beneath the Atlantic. In just a few minutes, the greatest ship of its era had vanished. But the tragedy was not over. Hundreds of people were now struggling in the freezing ocean. The water temperature was close to freezing. In those conditions, survival was measured in minutes. Many of those in the lifeboats would later describe hearing desperate cries echoing across the dark water. People calling for help, voices slowly fading as the cold took its toll. Within less than an hour, the sounds had stopped. By the time rescue ships arrived, the ocean had fallen silent again. Out of more than 2,200 passengers and crew, over 1,500 people had lost their lives. It was one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. But the story of the Titanic did not end that night. For decades, the exact details of the disaster remained unclear. Investigations revealed shocking mistakes and decisions that had contributed to the tragedy. Warnings about ice had been received throughout the voyage, yet the ship continued traveling at high speed through dangerous waters. There were not enough lifeboats for everyone on board, and emergency procedures had never been fully tested. These revelations shocked the public and forced major changes in international maritime safety laws. But perhaps the most fascinating discoveries came decades later. In 1985, an expedition led by oceanographer Robert Ballard finally located the wreck of the Titanic, nearly 12,500 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. For more than 70 years, the ship had rested silently in the darkness of the deep sea. When cameras first captured images of the wreck, the world was stunned. The Titanic lay broken on the ocean floor, its bow and stern separated by hundreds of meters, surrounded by debris scattered across the seabed. These discoveries confirmed many eyewitness accounts from that terrible night, but they also revealed new details about how the ship had broken apart as it sank. Even today, more than a century later, the Titanic continues to capture the imagination of people around the world, not only because of the tragedy itself, but because it represents a powerful lesson in human history. The Titanic was built during a time when many believed technology had conquered nature, but the disaster showed that even the most advanced machines can be vulnerable when faced with the power of the natural world. And beneath the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean, the remains of the Titanic still rest today, a silent reminder of ambition, confidence, and the night the unsinkable ship met the unforgiving sea.